I'm Brianna, 38 years old, and 3 weeks ago, at my father's funeral, my brother announced he was selling our family home to pay off his gambling debts in front of 40 people. My mother nodded. She actually nodded and said, "Your dad would understand. Your sister can find another place." I stood there, surrounded by relatives who wouldn't meet my eyes, feeling like I'd been slapped in the middle of a crowded room. But here's the thing they didn't know. There was something the lawyer was about to reveal. Something my father had kept hidden for 15 years. Before I continue, if you find this story worth hearing, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to know what happened next. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? What time is it where you are? Now let me take you back 3 weeks, to the night I got the call at 2 in the morning. My phone lit up my tiny studio apartment in Center City, Philadelphia, the one with the IKEA bookshelf, the potted snake plant I'd kept alive for 6 years, and stacks of accounting textbooks I still couldn't bring myself to throw away. Mom's name flashed on the screen. "Your father collapsed. He's at Jefferson Memorial. Come now." I drove 45 minutes through empty highways in my 2015 Camry, the one with 120,000 miles and a check engine light I'd been ignoring for months. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, I spotted Marcus's black Mercedes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He'd beaten me there. Of course he had. But it didn't matter. By the time I reached the ICU, Dad was already gone. The last time I'd spoken to him was 3 months earlier. A phone call that lasted maybe 90 seconds. He'd asked, "Are you doing okay?" And I'd said yes, and then we sat in silence until one of us made an excuse to hang up. I didn't know that would be the last time I'd hear his voice. I was used to being the one who arrived last. But this time, I wished I had arrived sooner. To understand what happened at that funeral, you need to understand my family. 20 years ago, I was 18, sitting at our dining room table with college acceptance letters spread out in front of me. Penn State, Temple, Drexel. I'd worked my entire high school career for those letters, and I needed my parents to help me figure out how to pay for it. My mother picked up the Temple letter, glanced at it, and set it down like it was junk mail. "Why would we spend that kind of money on you?" she said. "You're a girl. You'll get married, have children. Your husband will provide. That's how it works." I looked at my father. He was staring at his coffee cup, jaw tight, saying nothing. That same year, Marcus, 3 years older than me and already a sophomore at Villanova, got everything handed to him. Not scholarships, just checks from our parents. They'd bought him a Honda Accord for his commute. They'd rented him an apartment near campus so he wouldn't have to deal with dorm life. I got a list of jobs that hired 18-year-olds, so I figured it out myself. I applied for every scholarship I could find, landed enough to cover 70% of tuition at Temple, and worked 2 part-time jobs, weekday evenings at a call center, weekends at a coffee shop, to cover the rest. 4 years of sleeping 5 hours a night, of eating ramen because groceries were a luxury, of watching my classmates go to parties while I picked up extra shifts. I graduated with a 3.8 GPA and a CPA license that now hangs in my tiny apartment. I earned every letter of it. That's also why I stopped talking to my family for 2 years after graduation. I couldn't look at them without feeling the weight of everything they'd denied me. "Sons are the pillars of the family," my mother used to say. "Daughters are just guests passing through." I heard that phrase so many times, I started to believe it. The morning after Dad died, I drove back to the house I grew up in for the first time in 3 years. It was a colonial-style 4-bedroom in the suburbs of Philadelphia, built in 1985, with a wraparound porch and a backyard where I used to catch fireflies. The neighborhood was the kind where people put American flags on their mailboxes and knew each other's names. Upper middle class, respectable, the perfect backdrop for a family that looked perfect from the outside. Marcus was waiting at the front door when I pulled up. He hugged me, quick, one-armed, the way you hug someone you're obligated to acknowledge but don't particularly want to touch. "Long time, sis," he said. "You look tired." I didn't respond. I was too busy noticing the Louis Vuitton duffel bag in the hallway, the golf clubs leaning against the wall, the Gucci loafers lined up by the stairs. Marcus had been unemployed for 8 months. I knew because Mom had mentioned it during one of her rare guilt-trip phone calls. "Where's Mom?" I asked. "On the phone with the funeral home. She's got everything under control." I carried my overnight bag upstairs to my old room, or what used to be my room. The walls were still the same pale blue I'd painted them when I was 15, but everything else was different. My bed was gone, replaced by Marcus's overflow. More designer luggage, shoe boxes, a flat-screen TV still in its packaging. My childhood bedroom had become my brother's storage unit. I stood in the doorway looking at the pile of expensive things that belonged to a man who supposedly had no money, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. I didn't ask why my room had become his closet. Some questions answer themselves. The funeral was scheduled for 5 days later, per Dad's wishes. Simple, at Peterson and Sons, the local funeral home he'd driven past every day on his way to work. I handled the logistics. I called the funeral director, wrote the obituary, contacted relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I organized flowers, confirmed catering, and made sure the programs were printed with the right photo. The one of Dad from 10 years ago, before he started looking tired all the time. Marcus handled the sympathy. Whenever a neighbor stopped by with a casserole, he appeared in the doorway with his practiced grief, accepting condolences like a politician working a crowd. "Thank you so much for thinking of us," he'd say, hand on their shoulder, voice thick with emotion. Dad would have appreciated it. But behind closed doors, things were different. I noticed it on the third day. Mom and Marcus kept having hushed conversations in the living room, conversations that stopped abruptly whenever I walked in. I'd catch fragments. After the funeral, and real estate, and handle it quickly. On the fourth night, I was passing the kitchen when I heard Marcus on his phone. I know," he was saying, his voice tight with something that sounded like fear. "I'll have it soon, after this week. Just give me until—" He saw me and hung up immediately. "Who was that?" I asked. "Nobody. Work stuff." He hadn't worked in 8 months. I didn't push it, but I filed it away in my mind, another piece of a puzzle I didn't yet understand. That night, I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, wondering what my brother was so desperate to pay for, and why his fear seemed bigger than his grief. The night before the funeral, I couldn't sleep. So I did what I always do when I can't settle my mind. I organized. Dad had a small office in the basement, a cluttered room with a wooden desk and filing cabinets from the 1990s. No one had touched it since he got sick. I figured I could at least start sorting through things, make myself useful in a way that wouldn't require me to talk to anyone. The first filing cabinet was full of tax returns and utility bills going back decades. The second held old photographs, report cards, mine and Marcus's, and a folder labeled Important Documents. Inside, I found my birth certificate, a few photos of me as a baby, and a single sheet of paper with a logo I didn't recognize. Farwell Family Holdings, LLC, dated 2009. I stared at it. The document was some kind of operating agreement, dense with legal language I didn't fully understand. But I saw my name in the text, and my signature at the bottom, loopy and uncertain, the handwriting of my 23-year-old self. I remembered that day, 2009. Dad had called me and asked me to come home to sign some papers. Just administrative stuff for the business, he'd said. Nothing important. I was fresh out of college, still trusting him despite everything, so I signed where he pointed without reading the fine print. I'd forgotten about it completely until now. I slipped the paper into my purse, planning to ask Mom about it later. When I found her in the kitchen the next morning and mentioned Farwell Family Holdings, she waved her hand dismissively. "That company dissolved years ago. Don't waste your time digging through the past." So I didn't mention it again, but I kept the paper. Something told me to. The funeral was on a Thursday, gray and cold, the kind of November day that makes everything feel heavier. Peterson and Sons was the largest funeral home in the area, with dark wood paneling and stained glass windows that cast colored light across the pews. Over 40 people came, relatives, Dad's former colleagues from the construction company he'd managed, neighbors who remembered him as the quiet man who always shoveled their driveways after snowstorms. Marcus delivered the eulogy. He stood at the podium in a Tom Ford suit. I recognized the cut because I'd seen it in a magazine, $3,000 minimum, and spoke about Dad like they'd been best friends. He talked about fishing trips they'd taken, advice Dad had given him, the unbreakable bond between father and son. I sat in the back row, listening to stories I'd never heard, wondering if any of them were even true. The fishing trips, maybe, but the heart-to-heart conversations, the deep, meaningful connection? I'd lived in that house for 18 years, and I'd never seen Dad talk to Marcus about anything more personal than sports scores. But the crowd was moved. Women dabbed their eyes, men nodded solemnly. Marcus had always been good at performing. Mom sat in the front row, wearing black Chanel and her signature pearl necklace. A gift from Marcus, she liked to remind people, though we all knew Dad had paid for it. She accepted condolences with practiced dignity, the grieving widow who had everything under control. No one came to check on me. No one asked how I was holding up. I was just background noise, the daughter who'd been away too long to matter. I didn't know the eulogy was just the opening act. The real performance was coming next. After the final prayer, most people started gathering their coats to leave, but Marcus stepped back up to the podium and cleared his throat. If I could have everyone's attention for just another moment. The room stilled. I saw Mom nod at him from her seat, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, like a director cueing an actor. Our family has been discussing what to do going forward, Marcus said, his voice carrying that same rehearsed emotion from the eulogy. And we've made a difficult decision. We're going to sell the family home. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aunt Patricia, Dad's sister, put a hand to her chest. The house on Maple? Richard loved that house. I know, Marcus said, shaking his head with what looked like genuine sorrow. But it's time for a fresh start. Mom doesn't want to be there alone, surrounded by memories. And frankly, the upkeep is too much for her to handle by herself. He paused, letting that sink in, then added, We've already discussed it as a family. Mom, me, and Brianna. We're all in agreement. My stomach dropped. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't even been asked. I started to stand, to say something, but Mom turned around and looked at me. Her eyes were sharp, warning. Don't you dare make a scene. The house will be listed next month, Marcus continued. We just wanted everyone to know, so there are no surprises. After the announcement, people approached Mom with sympathy. Such a hard decision. Richard would understand. You have to do what's best for the family. No one asked me what I thought. I stood frozen in the back of the room, watching my childhood home get sold off at my father's funeral, and I didn't say a word. But Marcus wasn't finished. He looked toward Mom, and she rose from her seat like they'd rehearsed this too. I want to add something, she said, smoothing her black dress as she walked to the front. I know some of you might be wondering about Brianna's situation. My face went hot. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Brianna is a strong, independent young woman, Mom continued, her tone the same one she used when explaining why we couldn't afford something she didn't want to buy. She has a good job, her own apartment. She moved away years ago and built her own life. Richard would be proud of that. She paused, tilting her head with a sad smile. She doesn't need the house, not the way Marcus does. He's had some setbacks. He needs family support right now. I'm sure you all understand. Someone in the crowd, I think it was Aunt Dorothy, whispered, Well, she did abandon them for years. Your dad would understand, Mom said, looking directly at me now. Your sister can find another place. I felt the words land like a physical blow. She'd just told our entire extended family that I didn't deserve anything, that I was an afterthought, that whatever happened to my childhood home was none of my concern. A distant cousin named Barbara leaned toward me. You know your mother's right, honey. You've done so well for yourself. Marcus needs the help more than you do. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them about the scholarships I'd had to fight for, the jobs I'd worked, the years I'd spent building something from nothing, while Marcus drained every resource our parents had. But I didn't. I just stood there, feeling smaller than I had in years, and said nothing. After the service, I drifted outside while everyone else stayed to mingle. The November air was bitter, but I needed it. I needed to breathe something that didn't feel like betrayal. Through the window, I watched Marcus shake hands with a man in a tailored gray suit. They exchanged business cards. The man handed Marcus a folder with the logo of a real estate agency on the front. He'd brought a realtor to the funeral. Mom appeared beside the man, gesturing toward the door like she was giving directions. A minute later, I saw them all get into separate cars and drive away, toward the house, I realized. They were showing the property before Dad was even in the ground. I walked back inside to find my purse, and that's when I heard Aunt Dorothy talking to a group of cousins. Well, what do you expect? Brianna abandoned them, didn't call, didn't visit for years, and now she wants to show up and claim something? Blood doesn't work that way. I froze in the hallway, hidden by a pillar, and listened. Her poor mother, someone else added, having to deal with a daughter like that on top of losing her husband. At least Marcus stayed. He's been there for Linda through everything. I thought about all the times I'd called and been told Mom was busy, all the holidays I'd offered to come home, only to be told, we're keeping it small this year, all the ways I'd tried to rebuild bridges they kept burning. On my way out, I noticed something new on the front lawn of the funeral home, a real estate sign with a coming soon banner. They'd planned this for a while, and no one had thought to tell me. I took a photo of the sign. Evidence, I told myself, though I didn't know yet what for. That night, I tried to talk to them. The house was quiet. Most of the relatives had gone back to their hotels or their own homes, leaving just the three of us in the living room, Mom in Dad's leather armchair, Marcus sprawled on the couch, me standing in the doorway like a visitor in my own childhood home. I need to ask you something, I said, about selling the house. Mom looked up from her phone. What about it? You said we all agreed. We didn't. No one asked me anything. Marcus laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Come on, Bree. You haven't been part of this family in years. What do you care what happens to it? I care because it's our family home, because Dad died 4 days ago and you're already showing it to buyers, because I have just as much right to be part of this decision as either of you. Mom's expression hardened. You have no right. You walked away. You didn't call, didn't visit, didn't help when your father was sick. And now you want to show up and demand a say? I called. You said you didn't need me. We didn't need your guilt. We needed your presence. Marcus sat up, fixing me with a look that was almost pitying. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I need the money from this house. I've got investment debts. A lot of them. And if you make a scene about this, I'll tell everyone exactly what kind of daughter you've been. How you cut Dad off for 2 years. How you broke his heart. My throat tightened. That was my deepest shame. The years I'd refused to speak to Dad, and Marcus had just weaponized it. I'm trying to help the family, he said. You're trying to tear it apart. I left the room without another word, but I didn't leave the house. Not yet. I know what you're probably thinking right now. Why didn't I fight back? Why didn't I call a lawyer right then and there? But here's the thing you have to understand. This was my family, my mother, my brother, the people I'd spent my entire childhood trying to earn love from. Walking away from them had already broken something inside me once. I wasn't ready to do it again. If you've ever been in a situation like this, where standing up for yourself meant losing everyone you'd ever known, drop a comment below. Tell me I'm not alone. And if you want to know what happened next, stay with me. 3 days after the funeral, Mom called another family gathering, this time at the house. To discuss the estate, she said. So everyone's on the same page. 15 people crowded into the dining room. Aunt Dorothy, Uncle Frank, my grandmother on Mom's side, various cousins I barely recognized. The room felt smaller than I remembered, stuffed with bodies and opinions and the weight of decisions being made without me. Mom stood at the head of the table, a stack of papers in front of her. Marcus sat to her right, arms crossed, looking at me like I was a problem to be managed. "Here's the situation," Mom began. "Richard didn't leave a complicated estate. The house is the primary asset, worth around $800,000. My plan is to sell it, pay off outstanding debts, and use the remainder to support myself in my retirement." "What about Brianna?" Grandma asked. She was the only one who looked at me with something other than judgment. "Brianna has her own career," Mom said smoothly. "She doesn't need support. She moved out years ago, built her own life. I'm proud of her for that." "But she's still your daughter," Grandma pressed. "Richard's daughter." Aunt Dorothy, Mom's sister, jumped in. "With all due respect, Mother, Brianna hasn't exactly been present. She cut ties with this family. You can't walk away and then come back with your hand out." "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "I'm asking to be included in decisions about my own family's property." "You are included," Marcus said with a thin smile. "You're sitting right here, aren't you?" The room rippled with uncomfortable laughter. I felt my face flush. No one defended me. Not one person at that table spoke up to say I deserved a voice. Grandma caught my eye and looked away, her lips pressed tight. The real purpose of the meeting became clear an hour later. Marcus slid a document across the table toward me. The header read, "Disclaimer of interest in estate property." "What is this?" I asked. "It's simple," Mom said. "You sign this and you formally release any claim to the house or the proceeds from its sale. It protects everyone, keeps things clean." I stared at the paper. "You want me to give up my inheritance?" "You're not giving up anything," Marcus said. "Dad didn't leave you anything in his will. This just makes it official, so we can move forward without complications." "How do you know what Dad left me?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Mom. "We had the will reviewed by a lawyer. The house goes to Mom. That's it. This is just paperwork. If I already have no claim, why do you need me to sign?" His jaw tightened. "Because we want this done quickly. The buyer's ready. We don't need some estranged daughter showing up 6 months from now claiming she deserves a cut." "And if I don't sign?" Mom leaned forward. "Then I'll tell everyone in this room, and everyone who wasn't here, exactly what kind of daughter you've been. How you abandoned your father for 2 years when he needed you most. How you broke his heart." The same threat Marcus had made. They'd clearly coordinated. "Sign the paper, Brianna," Uncle Frank said. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Everyone was staring at me, waiting. I picked up the pen, Dad's Mont Blanc, I realized, the one he'd gotten for his 20-year work anniversary, and held it over the line. Then I set it down. "I need time to think," I said. Marcus's smile disappeared. "You have 24 hours. I drove back to my apartment that night feeling like I'd already lost. The studio felt emptier than usual. I sat on my second-hand couch in the dark, streetlights casting long shadows through the window, and ran through my options. I could sign the paper, give up whatever claim I might have, walk away, let them have the house. It would be easier. No more family meetings, no more accusations, no more being made to feel like I didn't belong. But something in me refused. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the memory of all those nights I'd worked double shifts to pay for a degree my parents refused to fund. Maybe it was the way Mom had announced to 40 people that I didn't matter. Or maybe it was the paper in my purse, the one with the logo I didn't recognize, Farwell Family Holdings LLC. I pulled it out and looked at it again in the dim light. My signature was there at the bottom, loopy and young, from 15 years ago. Dad had asked me to sign it, and I had without question, because I trusted him. What had I signed? I thought about calling a lawyer, but it was almost midnight, and I didn't even know where to start. Then I remembered. Dad's funeral program had listed a name, Gerald Whitmore, estate attorney, Henderson Family Council for 20 years. I found the number in Dad's old address book, which I'd taken from his office along with a few other things. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would call this Gerald Whitmore and ask him what Farwell Family Holdings meant. If I was going to lose, at least I wanted to know the truth first. Gerald Whitmore's office was on the 4th floor of a brick building in downtown Philadelphia, the kind of place with brass nameplates and Persian rugs and the faint smell of old paper. He was older than I expected, late 60s with white hair and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look like someone's grandfather. But his eyes were sharp when he shook my hand. "Miss Henderson, I was hoping you'd call." That surprised me. "You were? Please sit down." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "I've been your father's estate attorney for 20 years. He and I had an understanding." I pulled the LLC document from my bag and slid it across the desk. "I found this in his files. I don't know what it means, but it has my name on it." Whitmore picked it up and something flickered across his face. Recognition. Maybe relief. "Do you know about Farwell Family Holdings LLC?" he asked. "My mother said the company dissolved years ago." "Your mother is mistaken." He opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder, thick, well-organized, like he'd been keeping it ready. "Miss Henderson, there's something your father asked me to tell you, but only when the time was right." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "The family house, the one on Maple Street, it's not part of your father's estate." "What?" "In 2009, your father transferred the property into Farwell Family Holdings LLC. The house belongs to the LLC, not to him personally." I stared at him. "Then who owns the LLC?" Whitmore looked at me over his glasses. "You do, Miss Henderson. You're the sole member. You have been for 15 years. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. "That's not possible," I finally managed. "I would have known. Someone would have told me." Whitmore shook his head slowly. "Your father was very specific about confidentiality. He didn't want anyone to know. Not your mother, not your brother, not even you, until it became necessary." "But why?" He pulled another document from the folder. This one was older, the paper slightly yellowed. "In 2008, your father came to me with concerns. He'd noticed changes in Marcus's behavior, gambling, debts, the beginnings of what would become a serious problem." I thought of Marcus's desperate phone call at the funeral home, the fear in his voice. "Your father loved your brother," Whitmore continued, "but he didn't trust him. He knew that if anything happened to him, Marcus would find a way to drain every asset the family had. So he created a structure to protect the most valuable one, the house." "Yes. He transferred it into the LLC in 2009 and designated you, and only you, as the sole member. The operating agreement is ironclad, properly notarized, filed with the state of Pennsylvania, maintained and compliant every year since." "He paid the LLC fees this whole time?" "He set up a small fund specifically for that purpose. He thought of everything." I felt tears prick at my eyes. All those years I thought Dad didn't care. All those silences I interpreted as indifference. And this whole time, he'd been building a fortress around me. "Your father wasn't good with words," Whitmore said gently. "But he was meticulous with documents. This was his way of saying what he couldn't." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. "What do I do now?" "Now," he said, "we set the record straight." Whitmore let me sit in his office for as long as I needed. He made tea, Earl Grey, in china cups that looked like they'd been his grandmother's, and waited while I processed everything. For the first time since Dad died, I really cried. Not the polite, controlled tears I'd shed at the funeral. These were ugly, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. Grief and relief and confusion all tangled together. Dad had seen me. All along, he'd seen me. I thought about every time he'd sat silent while Mom dismissed me. Every holiday where Marcus was celebrated and I was tolerated. I'd interpreted his silence as agreement, as proof that he thought I mattered less too. But that wasn't it at all. He just hadn't known how to fight for me out loud. So he'd fought for me on paper. Whitmore handed me a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in Dad's handwriting. Shaky, the letters uneven, like his hands had been unsteady when he wrote it. He gave me this 3 months ago, Whitmore said. Asked me to hold it until you needed it. I didn't open it there. I wasn't ready. But I ran my thumb over the letters of my name and felt something shift inside me. There's going to be a formal will reading, Whitmore said. I'll arrange it for Friday. I'll invite everyone who was at that family meeting. They'll fight this, I said. They'll say I manipulated Dad or that the documents are fake. Let them say whatever they want. He pulled out another folder, this one full of receipts, notarized signatures, filing confirmations. I've been preparing for